I will give you full warning. This is from a story sent to me by a listener that is Christian. And I know I have a lot of Christian or religious listeners. Okay. And I want to warn you that this is about the Pope and atheism. Okay. And I am saying to you that I cannot guarantee that I will not offend a religious position in this discussion. Okay. I am going to, speak my mind as one always should, particularly when they're doing a podcast, when they're disseminating information. Okay. So if you do not want to hear, because I know you get a lot out of this show that has nothing to do with my atheism or whatever. And this is a show about science and technology and how it sets you free. Okay. Atheism is considered a scientific prospect. So it's worth talking about here. All right. I'm not going to save it for the climax. So if you do not want to hear that part of the show, you can skip to the next segment because we've got great stuff to talk about during important messages. Okay? So, let's do this. And I'm giving you full warning, okay, that I am going to say things, and that's okay. People can disagree. It's all right. These kind of discussions need to happen. And so I'm actually glad this got sent in by a listener. And I believe this is actually via my Facebook page, which hopefully won't be around much longer. So anyway, if you don't want to hear it, please, if you think this is completely out of place for a tech show, for a science and tech show to talk about, then go ahead, skip, go to the next segment. You don't have to hear this. Okay. But I'm going to do it. Here we go. So this is from, earlier in 2013. So this is kind of older news, but it's pretty evergreen, I guess. And it is from the Huffington Post. And Pope Francis, of course, this being the newest pope, the Black Pope is often called, not because he's black, he's actually Argentinian, but he is a Jesuit. So I don't know if that, how necessarily that gives him the title of the Black Pope. But here we go. Pope Francis's atheist letter says God's mercy has no limits. Once again, breaking with traditional Vatican protocol, Pope Francis on Wednesday, September 11th, this is 2013, penned a long letter to the Italian liberal daily La Repubblica to affirm that an open dialogue free of prejudices between Christians and atheists is necessary and precious. Well, I can't guarantee free of prejudice here, but anyway, free of, I'm not going to treat you like shit after the fact. How about that? Francis's front page letter was a response to two open letters published in previous months by Eugenio Scalfari, the founder of La Repubblica and an avowed atheist. The Pope's letter is especially notable for its open and honest assessment of the spiritual state of non-believers, and for an institution that long claimed sole jurisdiction on matters of salvation. Francis seems to open the door to the idea that notions of sin, conscience, and forgiveness are not the exclusive domain of the Catholic Church. In his messages to the Pope, among other things, Scalfari had asked him whether God forgives those who do not believe and do not seek faith. Francis seemed to hint in his response that those who don't believe are not necessarily excluded from God's forgiveness. Given that, and this is the key point, God's mercy has no limits, if you go to him with a sincere and repentant heart, the issue for those who do not believe in God is to obey their conscience, Francis writes in his letter. Sin, even for those who have no faith, is when one goes against their conscience, he added. To listen and to obey to one's conscience means to decide oneself in relation to what's perceived as good and evil. And this decision is fundamental to determining the good or evil of our actions. Oh boy. I'm going to read on. Speaking about the church's relationship with Jews, Francis stresses that Christians and humanity as a whole should be grateful that Jews have kept their faith despite the terrible tests of the past centuries. Too bad Jews about even just 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago couldn't have come to this conclusion, but Regardless, I'll read on. In the letter, the Argentine Pope also addresses one of the themes of his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, who had often condemned relativism, the incapacity of modern societies and men to recognize any absolute truth, such as God, as one of the evils of our time. So Pope Benedict was saying that, no, look, there is an absolute truth, okay? And that absolute truth is God and Jesus is the Son, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's what Christians say. That's the Christian position. It's not just Catholic. For Francis, there is no such thing as an absolute truth, if that means a truth that can stand by itself without any relationship. Truth, according to the Christian faith, is God's, this is the Pope talking, Pope Francis. Truth, according to the Christian faith, is God's love for us in Jesus Christ. Therefore, truth is a relationship. Francis concludes, despite the slowness, the infidelity, the errors and sins it committed and might still commit against its members, the Church, trust me, has no other meaning and goal but to live and witness Jesus. And that is the article. Okay. I can come at this from quite a few different aspects because I was raised a Jew. Later, my parents converted to Christianity. I became an atheist as a teenager, ended up going into the military, became a Christian again while in the military, stayed a Christian for quite a few years after that. What's the saying? How Paul was a Pharisee of Pharisees. Okay. I was a Christian of Christians. Believe me. I poured a ton of money into the church. I poured a ton of time into a church, not Catholicism. Okay. But it was more non-denominational. All right. And actually, when I was having a quote unquote crisis of faith, I will admit to you that I almost became a Catholic. And I'll tell you why that is. The reason I almost became a Catholic, and what I ended up doing was just becoming an atheist, again, which is what I was born, which in my opinion is what everybody's born. Okay. I was going to become a Catholic because Catholicism allows for, based upon various verses, some in 2 Timothy, okay, where it's not just, you don't just live by the words, but you also live by the traditions. This is coming from Paul. You live by the traditions that are laid out. So it's the word and traditions, and Catholicism is that organization that's been around for a good, couple thousand years, that has a ton of traditions, and that they can change the rules because you're supposed to follow the traditions. And if the tradition is that the Pope is the Holy See lays down what the law actually is for Christians, then it's great. It can make sense. Like if you have a problem with the creation story, it doesn't fit in with science, or there's something wrong in the Bible and it doesn't fit in with science, the Holy See can just change it. They can't change the Bible, but they can just change the interpretation. They can, break out the catechism of the Catholic Church, which is essentially, you can't understand the Bible without the catechism, according to Catholicism, okay? And they can put it in there that, no, this is what it actually means. So Catholicism is a very logical form of Christianity. And in fact, I would dare argue with you that it is the only true form of Christianity. So what I'm about to say here, understand that I'm coming from an aspect of, believe me, I get Catholicism. I still own a copy of the Catechism because I was so, really being into this, because so many like voluntarists and anarchists and libertarians and whatever are Catholic. So I thought it fit in pretty well with the path of liberty that I was going down, around the year 2006, 2007, as it was. Okay. But if I will say this, if I were a Christian and I read this from the Pope of the Catholic Church, I would run away from the Catholic Church in a heartbeat. So I'm going to talk about this in the first place from the position of a Christian. Because this is nuts. So let's see. Sin, even for those who have no faith, is when one goes against their conscience. No, wrong. If I were a Bible believer, sin is going against God's will, going against God's law, and the wages of sin is death. It is not going against your own conscience. That's subjectivism. That's saying, well, in my conscience, did Charles Manson then go against his own conscience? This is a ridiculous argument to be making. It's saying there's no objective reality. And then here we go. So for Francis, there is no such thing as an absolute truth if it means if it means a truth that can stand by itself without any relationship. He is saying right there is no objective reality. And here's my concern with this, because look, I know there's so many Christians, and I think it's insane that they want to toss out the writings of Paul. They want to toss out all the Old Testament, which doesn't make any sense, because how can you toss out the Old Testament and believe Jesus is the Christ without the reason that you knew Jesus was the Christ was because he was fulfilling prophecies from the Old Testament. So thus those things must be valid. And the only thing that Jesus ever quoted was the book of Deuteronomy, which I would argue may be the only valid book in the Old Testament, but that's another story. Okay. But come on. I know you want to toss all this stuff out. But then let's just say that all you go by is the word of Jesus Christ himself. Well, when Pontius Pilate is about to put Jesus on the cross, he has an argument saying, what did you say? Blah, blah, blah. What is this? And then the classic Latin line of, what is truth? And Jesus says, God is truth, which is what Pope Benedict XVI was making the point. But Pope Francis here is saying, not really. No, there's no absolute truth. There's no objective reality. And so if the largest organization or largest denomination within Christianity believes that there is no objective reality, I mean, what more do I have to say? So I take a lot of issue with this in a lot of ways. Okay, first off, what the Pope is saying is positively ridiculous from a biblical standpoint. Now,